things, and it'll work.
Over to you.
Yeah, if you actually come off iCloud and stop tweeting, it might help. So I'm slightly stressed. I don't like Manchester United. My family are Chelsea supporters. So this is like my comeuppance, I think. It's just been a nightmare. And I'm even going on the tour after this as well, and I think, God, how did I even get booked into that? But I might see Jose Mourinho, so it might be okay. So I have to apologise because my presentation is an old presentation because that's what I had downloaded, and basically there's an issue with the internet, so I can't sort of go live onto the internet. So apologies. So if I miss things out, we have a post if you've got any questions that you want to ask myself. Although I'm speaking, this is clearly a team effort. It's not me that's done this on my own, and it wouldn't have been possible without all the great doctors and midwives we have in Taunton. So a little plug for Taunton. We're in Somerset. We're a district general hospital. We support about 3,500 women to give birth, and we care for about 4,000 women. So a lot of you may have gone past us going to Cornwall and all the lovely beaches on your way. So, right. So what is sepsis? So if you remember nothing from me talking to you for about 15 minutes, you need to go away from here and think about sepsis whenever a woman presents to you who is unwell or shows one of the SIRS criteria for sepsis. So sepsis starts with an infection, and when this triggers a systemic inflammatory response, or SIRS as it's commonly referred to, then this is sepsis. And a systemic inflammatory response is defined as two or more of the following criteria. So that's a hypo or hypothermia, tachycardia, tachypnea, or raised white cell count. And the Embrace Maternity Mortality Report from December 2014, of the 357 women that lost their lives, 83 of those women died from sepsis. So 1 in 4 women died from sepsis between 2009 and 2012. And what we do know is that survival rates improve with early recognition and treatment. So we need to get better at it to save more women. And pregnant women are uniquely at risk compared to the rest of the adult population because their immune system's very cleverly modified to accept foreign proteins from the fetal placental unit so that we don't sort of attack our own baby. The downside of that is that we're more susceptible to infections and fighting them because of that. So, and also they're usually young fit women, and they're able to withstand the sort of physiology, insults of widespread inflammation when they're responding to infection, and often that's for long periods of time. So therefore, these women with sepsis, they can appear well, but often at the point of collapse without any warning. So the onset can be really quick. So although the number of women who died from sepsis fell in the review in 2014, there's always lessons to be learned. And actually, I think this is quite alarming. Over half of the women, 63% of women, when the reviewers looked, actually improvements to care may have made a difference to outcome. And this learning related primarily to timely recognition of the unwell woman, quick involvement of experts, so the sort of senior midwives and obstetricians, and getting those antibiotics in quickly. So the key areas for improvement within the review were acting on observations quickly, think sepsis, and initiate the Sepsis 6. So I think this probably may be familiar to a lot of you. There's been a lot of publicity recently with Ron Daniels from the Sepsis Trust speaking and saying sepsis needs to be treated basically like a cardiac arrest. This needs to be an emergency. And I mean, at some point, I think it probably needs to be an obstetric emergency, and maybe that will come. But the Sepsis 6 is a simple treatment pathway. So if all 6 interventions are delivered within 1 hour of recognition of sepsis, then that doubles your chance of survival. And the 6 interventions are listed there, and we all remember things differently. I tend to use the acronym BUFFALO. So we need to take bloods, measure urine, give fluid resuscitation, antibiotics, measure lactate, and give oxygen if the woman needs oxygen. And I think the important thing is every hour of delay in not giving antibiotics increases the chance of mortality by 8%. So really important that we get those antibiotics in. So down in Somerset, we did a local audit. One of our registrars, called Jess, we looked at 48. We pulled 48 sets of notes through coding between May 2014 and 15, and then we went through those notes and tried to identify women with infection who met the SIRS criteria, so that's systemic inflammatory response, and actually we only identified 10 women. From that. Can you see that very well? So this is just, so we're comparing how we did, so how many of those women got all 6 elements of the Sepsis 6. We didn't do too well on fluid balance with 80%, and lactate, only 3 in 10 women had a lactate taken. That's at any point. So within the hour, which is the criteria, actually none of the women had lactate taken, and approximately about half of the women had all the other 5 interventions performed. This is just a little graph of that there. So none of the women had the interventions done within the first hour. And I think at this point, I've got my colleagues here, and actually if you have any questions, I'm sure Sue, who's one of our labour coordinators and also a sepsis champion. Lactate wasn't something we talked about that readily, but it's a really important indicator of maternal well-being. And if you've got a lactate over 2, we need to be doing something quickly. If you've got a lactate over 4.5, then your mortality rate goes up 27%. So it's high. So we decided to do something. Is it working? Is it working, James? Okay. So we're going to see if this works. So we decided to get people to change. It can be exasperating. You know, I'm sure in our own lives and even at work. If this plays, I'm going to be quiet because I'm...
Real kids doing real things. Just thought you should know. My name's Hiram Grenny, and I was there for the whole thing. So here's a question. What does it take to get people to change? And I'm not talking about their socks and underwear, but change behavior, especially when it's hard. For example, every year close to 100,000 people die from hospital-acquired infections. That means people got sick at the hospital. And it turns out one of the main culprits is hand hygiene. That means just getting people to wash their hands could save lives. So my crack research team decided to conduct an experiment to see if we could change something as difficult as hand washing habits, only with the toughest subjects of all, kids. So here's what we did. We took 80 munchkins and put them into groups. First, we gave them a challenging puzzle to put together. You know, kind of like the projects you adults are always busy with. Then, we gave the kids a tempting distraction.
Hey guys, I got the cupcakes for you right here. They're delicious. I'm gonna set them right over here.
Once I see that you guys have put the whole puzzle together correctly, I'll raise my flag, just like this, and then I'll blow my whistle. Okay? And when I do that, you guys can all go and get your cupcake. So what would it take to get these kids to wash their hands? How about a good reason? So one thing you guys should know, there was a sick kid in here playing with the puzzle pieces. He had a runny nose and coughed a lot, so there's probably a lot of germs on everything. But there's hand sanitizer over there on the table that you can use to wash up. Okay, which will win out? Delicious frosted cupcakes or the fear of the typhoid toddler? Let's watch. They finished their task, and look, if the threat of one sick kid wasn't enough, just look at all the new germs popping up. So with all those good reasons to wash, what do you think they'll do? Okay, so that was a colossal failure. Now what? Well, at this point, most adults would quit. That's why you just keep changing the year on those New Year's resolutions. With the next group of kids, I changed the environment by moving the hand sanitizer closer and then put up a visual cue. This ought to make hand washing easier and more obvious, right? And in the end, the motivation to not get sick plus changing the environment didn't influence a single kid. Yikes! Next, I increased their ability, which is another source of influence. I had them all complete what is known as deliberate practice, or training, to increase their familiarity with good hand hygiene. Will adding another source of influence get these hand-washing offenders to wash up? Done. And... well, now we're seeing some better results. We're combining 3 different sources of influence, and some of the kids are actually washing their hands. It looks like we're on the right track. So next, I added another source of influence, social influence. What if somebody spoke up and said something? What would happen if their bosses were in the room with them? Here come the cupcakes. And there goes the flag. Will they wash? No! Look at them pouncing on those cupcakes like a pack of ravenous hyenas. But it's not too late, because something important happens. At just a critical moment, a peer, not even one of the bosses, speaks up.
Wash your hands.
Watch the effect. Success at last! So social motivation obviously made a difference. But was it the only thing that mattered? What about our other sources of influence? Here's what my kids had to say.
This time, I was walking over to get my cupcake, but then someone said, wash your hands, because this boy had the sniffles in here.
So what's the point? We often underwhelm overwhelming problems. We try a couple of things, and when they don't work, we give up. But my dad and his colleagues discovered the secret to overcoming tough problems. You need to combine at least 4, preferably more, sources of influence. And it doesn't matter if you try it with kids or hospitals, at the office, or even at home. If you use 4 or more sources of influence, your chances for success go up 10 times. 10 times! So there it is. The key to changing almost anything is to marshal the power of at least 4 or more sources of influence, but preferably all 6. And heaven knows, we need it.
Okay. So we decided that we would use this model of improvement in terms of using influencers to make a difference in terms of our treatment of women with sepsis. So I don't quite know how this slide's going to play because clearly it's an old presentation. So these are the things that we did at Musgrove Park. We didn't have a guideline for sepsis. There was a trust guideline, but a sepsis guideline was written with a pro forma, so a sepsis 6 pro forma, which is what you can see here on the screen. And we adapted that from a pro forma used in Wales and Fife to create our own local pro forma. We also worked with our pharmacist, so on our intranet page, it really is very easy for the staff just to click on, and that takes you to the obstetric formula about what actually to be giving these women who are presenting with sepsis. There's also an icon you can put on your iPads, and I think that's available to lots of hospitals. It's called RX Guidelines, and then you download that, and then you look for your own hospitals, and there's a huge amount of hospitals that are actually listed on that. So that's on our iPad as well. That goes into the room when a woman is septic. We did posters. That's one of the posters we did. We changed the posters. We didn't have the same poster, so it was on the backs of toilets on walls, and then we changed the poster so that it just didn't become part of wallpaper. We also, when we launched this, which is in October 2015, we had this great idea that we'd do a DVD and a video, because that would engage some members of staff. But actually, one of our hospitals very close by, 40 minutes away, called Yeovil, had already done a video. So if we do get time, or maybe between rooms, I'll play this video to you. It's called Don't Leave Me This Way, and you'll never forget the song, because it's clearly all about sepsis, and it's fantastic. So we put that on our desktops, so when midwives logged in or doctors logged in, that would come up on the desktop and they could play it, and that was just another way of influencing what we were doing. We sent memos to all the midwives through emails, and we also have safety briefing folders on all of the wards, so the memos in there. So at the safety briefing, that's discussed. We're launching this Sepsis 6, we've got the guideline, this is what you need to be doing. Clearly, the labour coordinators were all on board, and I think they're so important when we were doing this in terms of their helicopter view of what was going on, and getting those antibiotics in within the hour. We've also got a maternity sepsis group, and we link with the sign up to safety team within the hospital. So we go to that meeting quarterly. We obviously learn from them what they're doing on the general side of the hospital as well. And we have a consultant obstetrician on that. We have an anaesthetist on that group, the sepsis champions, which are the midwives as well. We purchased a sepsis trolley, which, in my view, what we didn't do, which is what is done in the video, is that they were obviously measuring improvement as they introduced all the new influences. We just had sort of a bit of a wham-bang approach to that. And I think the sepsis trolley was really key. So the antibiotics are in that trolley. When a woman is septic, the trolley gets wheeled into the room. So you're not having to go in and out of the room to get the antibiotics. And we've also got sepsis champions, and that's a picture of 3 of them there. So these are the results afterwards. We then re-audited. So we launched this in October, and we looked at notes. We had 30 sets of notes, and we identified those women from the labour ward diary. We asked midwives to email us, but actually we had 30 women that we were able to look at. And you can just see the pre and post cycle and the improvement, which I think is pretty amazing. We did set a target for 90% to have, so women who were identified as septic, that we would get all 6 interventions in, 90% of them within 1 hour. We didn't quite get there. We're at 77%, as you can see. And that monitoring is ongoing, so we're continuing to monitor that and identify areas where we can continue to improve and learn from. But I think the big thing is lactate is people know what a lactate is now. It's just something that's just talked about, have we done that? It's just another way of illustrating our compliance with it. We also undertook a survey. We asked the staff what they thought of the trolley, what they thought of the proforma. We asked for suggestions for improvement. There was a problem with people forgetting the code, so that was being put on the back of our drug cupboard. There was a problem with closing it at times. So those problems and issues have been sorted. But the proforma and the trolley have been really positively received. And you can't actually see that well. The only red area, so the green is saying, yes, it's made a difference. The proforma, using the proforma in my recognition of managing women with sepsis. The blue is they neither agree or disagree, and the red is, no, it made no difference. And the red one there, that's about, actually, did it help me recognise the septic patient? But it isn't necessarily about recognition, because these women are scoring generally on our Muse chart, and then it's about implementing the treatment. So I haven't got very long. So some conclusions for us were that the implementation of the Sepsis 6 bundle through a variety of influences were really, really helpful in embedding this change across our unit, and it has improved our awareness of sepsis as a clinical emergency. The proforma, the staff said it was simple to use, it's effective, it increases awareness. And so it's that continual curiosity to change. And so the other thing I think, some advice I'd give, is actually step back and observe the process. So I don't work all the time clinically, but I did actually treat somebody with sepsis 6, and actually it was just learning at that point, there actually was a trolley well stocked. These were just small little improvements that we could make. So going forward, it's about keeping up the momentum. As I said, the ongoing monitoring happens. The other thing we did was that we emailed staff. So when as the monitoring goes on, we were emailing staff saying, well done. You've treated this woman, you got the antibiotics and all the interventions in within an hour. We're just about to give out stars, which is what they do on the general side, and they've been very popular in terms of CPD and revalidation. We also have a quarterly newsletter that's part of our Sign Up to Safety, and this is one of our high-level aims, is about treating women with sepsis. And the UK Sepsis Trust have just launched clinical tools, and one of those is a maternity tool, and so we will be looking at whether we actually adopt this tool and don't continue with our tool that we have. And that's it. So thanks very much.